Good morning. I'm Steve Runyon. I'm your Sunday associate today. Welcome to Morristown Unitarian Fellowship, where we are an inclusive community that welcomes you wherever you are on life's journey. We have some announcements today. First of all, I don't see any small kids here, but in the first service at this point, I didn't either, and they came in later. So if you have any kids or anybody sitting next to you that they feel like they need some more room, the library is back there, and the service is actually piped in there so that you can still watch even as your kids run around and play. This afternoon at 12:45, the Lunch Bunch is meeting at the Cottage 2 Chinese restaurant in Morristown. Tomorrow at noon, Lunch with Your Principals is meeting online. It's an online only activity. It's meeting to discuss wokeness and whether or not the Sierra Club went too far. Next Sunday, April 2nd at 12:45 p.m., the Odyssey Project will feature Beth Wilson. On Thursday the 6th at 6 p.m., Reverend Joel is hosting a Seder dinner. And on April 8th at 4 p.m., the Green Earth Ministry Committee will be screening the film Current Revolution in the meeting room. I don't know if you saw the poster for it beforehand. It's a very exciting looking. There now. Oh, there you go. Yep. Okay, so the American Resilience Project with Arizona State. Talking about just transition to clean energy, because obviously the richer you are, the easier it is to transition. So we need to give consideration for everybody. There will be 2 listening sessions in April concerning features in our new fellowship hall construction. These discussions are here to hear your views so the best design decisions can be made. Sessions will be held in room 204. April 2nd and 10:45, we'll discuss the issue of gender-neutral restrooms. And April 16th at 12:45, we'll discuss the use of a kitchen pass-through window. A complete listing of all events can be found online at https://muuf.org/calendar. So please see there for anything that I might have said too quickly or any additional announcements that are also there. We will be starting our summer schedule a little bit early on May 7th. Our Sunday worship service will go to the summertime schedule of a single service at 10 a.m., and that will carry through to Labor Day. And on May 7th, that's a big day. The worship service will celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Flower Communion. It will be led by Reverend Joel in the 2nd grade RE class. And after that service, we'll have a brunch, and we'll conclude with a congregational meeting to approve the Ministerial Search Committee. And now we have a special announcement from some of our kids.
The children of the fellowship invite you to share your talents at the All Fellowship Talent Show.
All ages, skills, and talents are encouraged to sign up.
Join us on April 1st at 3 p.m. here in the meeting room. The sign-up sheet is in the Great Hall.
It's going to be a great time for all.
I signed up. So you can come and hear me sing. I'm going to have fun with that. Isn't it great to be a congregation in which children are invited to take initiative and to plan the use of even this meeting room. That was my experience growing up Unitarian Universalist, and I'm so grateful that they can have that same experience. I've been thinking a lot about gratitude today. In some ways, really the theme in some ways of what we're talking about, although from a very different perspective. Early on in my ministry, I was discovering the importance of appreciation, of practicing gratitude, of saying thanks when I had something to be thankful for. And now, mind you, this is back in the days when the internet was just getting started, so there wasn't anything like a Facebook or social media, but there were these things called bulletin boards, and we could do messages back and forth. And there was this one bulletin board, lots of Unitarian Universalists communicating and talking back and forth with one another about various themes. And I was talking as a fairly young guy. I was 30 years old, and which now that I'm 63, it seems really young. I think I thought I was more. I knew more than I did at the time, but I knew that gratitude and appreciation were really important for me. I was learning a lot from that spiritual practice. And I said as much on this bulletin board and got various responses, but I had this one guy come back and say, well, why would that be so important? And I came back and said, well, when I'm sitting down to a meal, I'm thankful for the plants and the animals. I express gratitude to them for the nourishment I'm getting. And the guy wrote back and he said, dude, the chicken's already dead. And even if it were live, it wouldn't understand what you're saying. That's useless. What's the point? And I was really kind of shocked by that. And I tried to explain to him, no, the way I feel more interconnected with the world, the practices become very important to me. He could not get his head around that for the life of him. And nothing I could share with him would convince him otherwise. And, he's coming from a very sort of rationalist perspective. And at the time, I really wanted some good hard science because I thought, there's got to be science around this for gratitude, right? There wasn't much in the way of science. There were a lot of people who, through the millennia of human existence, had written about how beneficial it can be to be grateful. The science wasn't quite there yet. Years later, actually about 8 years ago, I started running across all kinds of studies talking about the science of gratitude. And it's amazing. If you do brain scans of people who are practicing gratitude, their brains light up in all kinds of different ways and in patterns that show that there's neural pathways lighting up that are the same pathways that help us connect with each other, that understand the world around us better, the same pathways around which we experience happiness or self-understanding. I love that science. I actually tried to find the guy, see if I could find him and look him up and say, dude, here's the science. I finally found it. But wasn't able to find him. But I'm grateful for a lot of wisdom that I got along the journey about the practice of gratitude. And grateful to be here with you, folks online and here in person this morning, folks in the library as well.
As we light our chalice, we say together, love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And our first hymn this morning is hymn 21, For the Beauty of the Earth.
Stand in spirit or in body.
Source of all to
had the most interesting thing happen between the two services. I told a story about a boy who went to his grandfather, and the boy was angry and struggling because he was feeling deep hatred. He'd gotten into a big disagreement with a friend, and he'd gone to his grandfather. And he said, "Grandfather, what do I do with these feelings of hate? How do I manage them?" And his grandfather said, "Yes, I struggle also with those feelings. And so I try to nurture the positive feelings. It's as though I had two wolves or two dogs or two creatures in me. One of them acts out of anger, and the other acts out of love. And they struggle a lot." And the boy asked his grandfather, "Well, who wins the struggle?" And the grandfather said, "The animal you feed." Now, I had attributed this story in the first service. I thought it was a Cheyenne story, and somebody explained to me that they had heard this story, but never really found where it could be attributed to. And added this really important piece of wisdom, for which I'm very grateful, that there are times that creature, that wolf, that dog within us that acts out of anger can be a resource, can be a source of energy for us, perhaps to take care of the world, to take care of each other in ways that we might not normally be able to. When I was talking with the kids, one of the things that I shared with them as I told them that story was how important it was for me the first time I heard it. Explained to them that I'm an alcoholic and that there was a time in my life where I didn't think very straight. And when I became angry, my anger would have me either thinking poorly and making bad decisions, or even worse, have me thinking poorly and using alcohol as a way to deal with the anger. I said, this wasn't working for me. And I was really grateful for the story because it helped me understand that if I fed the love in my life, it turned me away from the way I was misusing anger. And the way to feed that part of myself, to feed that wolf within, if you will, was through gratitude. And so I practiced gratitude. It'll be another sermon to think about what I might do with that other creature. But it has worked well for me, as I explained to the kids, to be able to say thank you in every moment, in any moment, even a moment like this, to say thank you for this fellowship. Thank you to those who made this fellowship possible, got it started. And thank you to those who are going to be here with you someday in the days and years to come. I'm grateful that we celebrate these milestones and passages as well. It's a ritual reminding us of the interconnections we create as community, of the mutual care we give one another in community, and reminding us even of our humanity. Barbara Costella Stasiak shares this morning that she was at a Douglas College alumni conference and had the pleasure of meeting the daughter of two founders of this fellowship, Marsh and Jane Stiding. They were the fourth and fifth people to sign the membership roll in 1955. Their daughter Gwen attended religious education classes here and was married here in 1968, just before this meeting room was built. Her dad created this beautiful lectern, which later Beth Wilson tells me was rebuilt, and he rebuilt, and then Joe Erhane refinished. And I love that pulpit.
My father.
Your father.
My father did both.
Both. Your father did both. Thank you.
We built it and we finished it because it was falling apart.
And Joe added the chalice on the front.
Yes.
Nancy Lee McClure writes that her daughter Kate, who lives in Alaska, is in Hawaii participating in the Lava Man race. She's running a 25-mile race. And please send her vibes of energy now, says Nancy. She needs it right now. Marjorie Wormser asks us to send good thoughts or prayers of comfort and peace to her neighbor of 25 years, Dale. Dale has been like a brother and is now entering the twilight of life after a long illness. And our care, our wishes, our prayers to Iraj Mohabalian, a member here. His mother died this past week. And gratitude to those who helped find and select our incoming music director. You might have seen the announcement I sent out about that day before yesterday. One little error in there. It was David Horst, who was part of that search team, and thank you, David, and not Don Preziosi, who let me know this morning. I said, sorry about the error there, Don. And he said, yeah, especially says, because I can't carry a tune at all, and it just wouldn't make sense. So, and lastly, gratitude to all of you for reading the many notices you're getting from me these days, 3 days in a row now. You're a busy place with a lot going on. You're a people that are doing much in the world. And I will be most grateful if you will continue to pay attention to all of the communication that's coming. You've got a lot going on. We're going to need your attention. I invite you into the spirit of contemplation or meditation or prayer. Spirit of life, there are days I do not feel grateful at all. I might be anxious, I might be angry, I might be lonely. I cannot make sense of what some people do in the world and hurting each other. Sometimes my neighbors. Why do they vote the way they do? The news can be bleak, it can be confusing, and I just can't feel it. And then I remember I can still choose to practice gratitude. I can choose to be grateful for the earth. We can choose to be grateful to this earth and the food that nourishes us. We can choose to be grateful for water that gives us life and interconnects everything alive on earth. We can choose even to be grateful for this air we breathe. Let us choose to thank the spiritual ancestors who made this place possible for us. Let's be grateful for their stories and their struggles and the wisdom they have left for us to live by. Let us choose to see our family, our friends, our neighbors with new eyes. They have created for us homes, places where we can grow and come to be. And yes, especially these days, I'm learning to practice gratitude for our neighbors. Let us practice gratitude for all our neighbors, no matter how they voted. That's definitely a practice right now. Let us choose to see this whole planet as our shared home, the place where the future of all people draws us together, gives us life. Let us choose to be appreciative. And let us make this choice with courageous hearts, knowing that sometimes to practice thank you, gratitude, is not easy. May we all sit as guests at a welcome table around which gifts are passed and received, and let us not take anything for granted. and in our choosing, may we give the world an example to also practice gratitude and to live by love whenever possible. For all that we have to be thankful for. Amen. So be it. Blessed be. I invite you to sing with me. We are not our own. It's number 317 if you would like to use the book, and the words will be on your screen. I invite you to stand in body or spirit.
The reading today is from Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. The leeks today are twice the size they were on my first visit, and the scent of onions is strong where a deer has bruised the leaves. I pass by the first clump and kneel by the second. Once again, I quietly ask permission. Asking permission shows respect for the personhood of the plant, but it is also an assessment of the well-being of the population. Thus, I must use both sides of my brain to listen to the answer. The analytic left reads the empirical signs to judge whether the population is large and healthy enough to sustain a harvest, whether it has enough to share. The intuitive right hemisphere is reading something else, a sense of generosity, an open-handed radiance that says, "Take me," or sometimes a tight-lipped recalcitrance that makes me put my trowel away. I can't explain it, but it is a kind of knowing that is for me just as compelling as a no trespassing sign. This time, when I push my trowel deep, I come up with a thick cluster of gleaming white bulbs, plump, slippery, and aromatic. I hear yes. So I make a gift from the soft old tobacco pouch in my pocket and begin to dig. Our offertory today will be split 50-50 with New Jersey Together, which is a multi-faith, multi-issue, and nonpartisan organization that partners with religious congregations, nonprofits, neighborhood organizations, and parent groups to develop leaders, strengthen communities, and seek justice.
So Robin Wall Kimmerer is the author of a book titled Braiding Sweetgrass. I just am captivated by the book for many reasons. But as I'm thinking about it this morning, I'm thinking about how she describes her love for the hard science of botany and her love for plants. It might sound like the same thing, but not quite. So, when she was accepted as an undergraduate student at the State University of New York, the College for Environmental Science and Forestry in Syracuse, some years ago, she arrived excited as a freshman, starting her first year in college. She was excited and nervous. She wanted to make a good impression. She had believed for most of her life she had been born to become a botanist, to study plants. She felt sent by the plants to become a scientist, a botanist. So her botany professor and advisor asked her at their first meeting, well, why do you want to major in botany? She could repeat all kinds of knowledge about plants and recite what it took to succeed in botany. She knew already. But she answered him by saying, I would like to learn about why asters and goldenrod look so beautiful together. Miss Wall, said the professor, that is not science and not the sort of thing with which botanists concern themselves. And so he put her back down in the introductory botany course so she could learn true science. Now, Robin Wall Kimmerer was also the daughter of a Native American, a man who was born and had started to grow up among the Potawatomi people. The Potawatomi people had, according to what we know from history, first had been living in Indiana, actually around Indianapolis, which is the place I lived right before I came here to Morristown. They were moved about 140 years at gunpoint. The United States government forced them to a reservation up in northern Wisconsin. And then, some 70 or so years later, U.S. government marshals came to that reservation, arrested a lot of the children, including Robin Wall Kimmerer's father, and took them to a school thousands of miles away from their home. His hair was cut. It's a terrible thing to do to anyone who comes from many First Peoples cultures in North America. A violent thing to do. And he was punished if he spoke his native language. He was hit if he spoke his native language. So the reason Robin Wall Kimmerer grew up in upstate New York and not in northern Wisconsin is because that is where her father ended up after that schooling, that forced schooling in which he was prohibited from speaking his language. Robin Wall Kimmerer still learned much from her father. She spent a lot of time with the plants and the landscape where she was growing up, near Syracuse. That's why she could say the landscape has taught her its language. Kimmerer, though, wanted to learn her father's first language and had started to study it about 10 or 12 years ago. And as she started with her first class, an elder Potawatomi speaker explained, our language is the heart of our culture. It is our way of seeing the world. It is too beautiful for English to explain. I've always loved languages, the different ways we can speak about life and meaning and even how we see or understand, comprehend the world around us. One of the amazing things about Potawatomi is Potawatomi, like many Native American or First Peoples languages, is 70% verbs. English is just the opposite, at 30% verbs. English is really all about the nouns. I confess I have found English for most of my life a very frustrating language. All these nouns, we name all kinds of things, and there's this weird thing that in the naming, it's like we We think we're in control of it, or it's something for us to use. I don't know what it is about English. I'd kind of like to study Potawatomi someday, because Robin Wall Kimmerer writes, it has a grammar that is based on the interconnected web of life itself. She writes, though, that it was not easy, just even spiritually, to be really engaging the language of her father's people. She writes about the first moment of studying Potawatomi. She was looking at a Potawatomi English dictionary. There are lots of dictionaries like that if you're not familiar with them. There's like a German English dictionary or Russian English dictionaries. There are Swahili English dictionaries, Swahili Russian dictionaries. There are all kinds of dictionaries that help us understand how different languages can be brought together, translated for each other. She's looking at a Potawatomi English dictionary, and she was confused because she was looking at the word Saturday, and it was a verb. It is a verb. Sunday, too. We're Sundaying? Sunday is Sundaying? She looked up other words. To be a hill. It actually doesn't work in English. To be red. It's actually hilling, redding. I don't know, that's like purpling or something, I think. Ridiculous, she ranted in her head. This is bizarre. No wonder no one speaks this anymore. Look, here's another word, to be a bay, like a body of water, to be a bay. And then, as she has her finger in the book, she imagined those missionary teachers who beat her father when he spoke his native Potawatomi. And he could hear them saying, good, she's giving up. And she writes, a electric current sizzled down my arm from my brain to my finger onto the page. To be a bay. And in the moment, I could smell the water of the bay. I could watch the water rock against the shore, hear it sifting through the sand. If a bay is a noun, then the water is dead, defined by humans. But the verb frees the water from bondage, and it becomes alive. And in fact, in Potawatomi, almost everything is alive. So Potawatomi elders who still mostly speak Potawatomi, when they translate into English, they will say phrases like this. Oh, go among the standing people. Take some time. Or spend some time with those beaver people that built the dam among the standing people. Trees, beavers, goldenrod and aster, flowers. They're not things in the language, they're beings. And something that's essential in understanding just the culture of what it is to be Potawatomi or many other Native American or First People in North America is that when everything that nourishes us and with which we're interconnected has some sort of presence, is something more than something we just name and control. We think differently about how we interact with the world. So, for example, in the reading, Robin Wall Kimmerer writes about asking if she could take from the plant. And here's a yes. And then she gives thanks. And then she receives the gift from this other being with gratitude. Kimmerer speaks about how a spiritual life begins with gratitude. Actually, I think for Unitarian Universalists, even if you don't agree with the thing I'm saying, I think our spiritual lives together, I recommend gratitude. It's a great place to start every moment, every day, every service. Kimmerer says, gratitude calls us to acknowledge the personhood of all beings, from maple trees to snapping turtles, beavers, chickens. It's an antidote to the arrogance of our time. It has, for me, gratitude has been for me an antidote to despair and to rage, much like the advice a good therapist might give us to counter despair when it distorts our thinking, our understanding of the world around us. Be grateful. Let it lead you to sing or to cook meals with others. Laugh and love. Give thanks as you do. I've even heard some folks say, this gratitude, this way of then coming back into life and joy, it's a great way to resist oppression. We can transform the helplessness of despair or our anger by singing and sharing these meals, by giving thanks together. So, as I mentioned, I struggle with English. Robin Wall Kimmerer once lamented her struggles with English to a Cheyenne elder. She loves the language. It's great for practicing science, and science is very meaningful to her. She explained to the elder that how she struggled with the completely different ways the languages existed. And the Cheyenne elder, the Cheyenne people are from Colorado, the Cheyenne elder explained to her that for those First Peoples in Colorado, the spirit of love and respect doesn't have to be spoken here at the lips. He said to her, if you speak it here from the heart, other beings will hear you. It was important for Robin Wall Kimmerer to hear this because she didn't want to give up her love and her practice of science, the science of botany of plants. But how was she going to balance that with her love of what she was learning as a Potawatomi person who was in a deep relationship with plants even before she ever spoke a word of Potawatomi? And then she came to understand it. This is a good moment for that slide, that picture of the asters and the goldenrod. It turns out that asters and goldenrod, asking the question, why are they beautiful together, is a very excellent scientific question. Asters have the purple flowers, goldenrod has yellow flowers, and the colors purple and yellow are complementary. Look at them on an artist's color wheel. They're opposed to each other, opposite on the wheel. They stand out when you have them next to one another. And in our eyes, there are 3 types of color receptors in the back in our retinas. One of the receptors is meant to see the light waves of 2 colors, purple and yellow. And the eyes of bees are also especially tuned to see purple and yellow because these are the colors of these flowers that have a lot of nectar that the bees use to survive. It feeds them. And there's an interconnected relationship that the flowers have with the bees because as the bees collect food for themselves, they also spread pollen from among the different flowers so that there'll be a new generation of flowers in the next season. The flowers need the bees as much as the bees need the flowers. Kimmerer realized the question she had as a freshman entering her school about goldenrod and asters, this question she had, why are they beautiful together? It was emblematic of a larger question that she has now come to wrestle with. How do you live in these 2 worlds? How do we as Unitarian Universalists live in a world where science explains so many things, and yet there are other ways of knowing by which our very survival may be based? That pairing of asters and goldenrod is a deep connection. And the way in which it draws us to a mutual appreciation, that idea of that pairing, that interconnectedness, can remind us of the power, the antidote to despair. First peoples in North America, Native Americans, the Potawatomi, the Cheyenne, the Navajo, the Ojibwe, the Kanien'kehá:ka in northern New York. They have survived almost 500 years of some pretty difficult suffering, often stripped of their ability even to speak their languages, yet they have survived. And they've survived by starting with gratitude and understanding the deep interconnected web of life in which we live. Robin Wall Kimmerer, Professor Kimmerer, realized, as she is now a professor at that same school that she graduated from years before, she realized we are surrounded by a world of beings and connections of deep beauty. Indigenous knowledge and scientific knowledge, she writes, can be goldenrod and asters to each other. It took me a long time to really understand how to practice gratitude in my own life, how important it was becoming to me. You know, I had that online argument years before with the fellow who was kind of poking fun at me for thanking chickens I'd already eaten, and yet it felt absolutely necessary to me, but I didn't have an understanding of why. It didn't take too long, though, that I was offered a gift. I was in a meeting of Unitarian Universalist ministers in New Mexico. It was the gathering of what then was a district of Unitarian Universalist congregations that ranged all the way from Montana down to New Mexico and parts of Texas, Colorado. It's a big district, and we would get together once a year for a week. And usually we would get together in a retreat center near Santa Fe. And the minister who was at the congregation in Santa Fe, an older, wiser minister, had made a very good friend who was an elder in the Zuni nation of Indian people, of First Peoples. The Zuni are very interesting people, I discovered since that meeting. They've kept their head down a lot over the 5 centuries. They've managed to keep their language, keep their culture. And they have some wisdom that they're willing to share if one's respectful in asking for it. At that time, this Zuni elder agreed to speak with us only because he was a good friend with this colleague, this older colleague. I was this young minister. I maybe was in a year or two of my ministry, and in my young 30s, very young 30s. I thought I knew a lot more than I did. In fact, I'm sure of it, as I tell this story especially. We welcomed the Zuni elder, and he began to speak to us about the traditions of his people, how the Zuni know that all life is interconnected. And he talked about how the knowledge of science was challenging Zuni traditions and culture. But the elder was careful as he spoke to us, because there are things that are private in the Zuni tradition. There are things not to be shared with people who are not Zuni or people who have not been trained in the tradition, or there's knowledge that could be used against the Zuni people, and so they protect that. He spoke thoughtfully so he would not violate his people's traditions. Now, I, this young minister who loved the idea of the interconnected web of existence, I was very grateful he was there, very excited as I was listening to him, because being very fond of that, of the seventh principle, where we talk about being in this interconnected web of existence. As soon as he was done speaking, sort of being I was a young white guy with a lot of enthusiasm, and I just let my enthusiasm carry me on. And as soon as the elder was done speaking, I stood up, did not even thank the elder, and got right to my question. You know, we Unitarian Universalists, we have a principle a lot like what you just described about the interconnected web of existence. It's our seventh principle. We're pretty good at science, but we have no tradition for the web of life, really, other than we have this phrase right now. We're so new. I don't even know, how do we practice it? Do you have any advice? The elder laughed at first. he was a bit shocked. Then he was silent for a long time. And my colleague, my elder, wiser colleague, looked over at me and put his finger to his mouth, like, you can shut up now. And for me, the elder was silent for a long time. Then he spoke. There's a tradition of hunting in Zunyi. I am from a clan that hunts deer. Before we hunt, we pray. We ask for permission to hunt. When a deer comes to us, we shoot it with our rifles. And then, as it lays dying, we go to the deer and we thank the deer. And we take into our breath the breath from the nose of the deer. Then, as we give thanks, we take the deer home to our families for nourishment. It would be a crime to us to take the deer without gratitude. It would be a crime to us to eat the body of the deer without gratitude. The life of the deer becomes a part of our own lives, our own bodies. And our traditions are very old, explained the Zunyi elder. And he said to me kindly, traditions take time. Traditions take attention. They cannot be rushed. Just as gratitude cannot be rushed. It took me a lot of years to put into practice the gifts that he gave me in that moment. And the gifts, his first gift was a reminder to always say a polite thank you when receiving gifts, especially an important one like the one I had just received. His second gift was this wisdom about gratitude. It's more than courtesy. It's what interconnects us. It's what opens us to life and to one another. And it sustains us, reminds us of how important it is to reorient ourselves to love, to awareness, to mutual care. It reminds us that what gives us life is this web of life in which we exist. Without the web, we wouldn't be here. And for these gifts, I have become more and more grateful over the years, the gifts of wisdom and of gratitude, and how I have learned in my own life to recover the connections that give me joy, the connections that make my life fuller and more beautiful than I could ever have imagined. If you're looking at the paper order of service, not sure how Google played a trick on us or whether it did, but we're not singing 112 to close with. We're singing 1064. And I invite you to sing with me. You can look at the words here on the screen. You can use this book, Singing the Journey, under the chairs. It'll be on the screens if you're at home or in the library. Please stand and bow your spirit.
Standing on the
Please be seated. Thank you for the light of community that you bring and create in this gathering through your commitments to one another. May the love, the compassion, the joy that you find in practicing gratitude, may it carry you through a world that sometimes forgets to be appreciative, to see others for who they are and what they have to offer. Go out into a world that needs this practice, that needs this joy. And know that when your light is hard to find, we'll be here every week, every day. Go in peace, be in peace. Thank you.